Hello and welcome. This is the fourth and final part of pretty much all of the altcoins that I'm able to at least see on the TradingView website. There's a few coins that I like not available on here, but what I like about this is it keeps my settings as such. I wish on Bittrex I could have it so that it always has the logarithmic chart with the 18 average band that I show, because it's available to be shown on that, but every single time you go to a new code, you have to manually put it in. It's a pain in the ass, really. I'm able to go through these codes relatively quickly, but it's going to be an hour and a half of total time for the day. I almost feel like it's like a school class. I'm amazed on how many people are watching it, but you know what? I understand this. I feel it's great information as well, especially if you're in the business of trying to trade and make money, because this is what it's all about, making money. That's what I'm in it for anyway. So then let's go on to some more charts. VIA, and there's a lot in the X's. There's a lot, but VIA with a pattern of all of these highs and a huge move from this band, overextended to say the least. So I wouldn't be buying it. It's only had a couple decent pullbacks, but it's still not enough within this chart, within the shorter term 4 hour time frame. And really it's so indecisive because since the move, it's had this short term sideways movement. It could easily still have maybe a small price correction down below in this 50 area. Plus you got this more major level of where it was in or around a little over 30 or in that ballpark area. Let's move this on to the weekly chart, which is an extremely scary situation because it's very overextended. It has pierced above previous high. It's in that area. I most certainly would never be buying anything like this. I would quickly look here for the pullback, but no chance I would buy this, as when it's up so much, you oftentimes get good pullbacks. It could keep going higher, but I think the odds are more likely it won't. Vericoin on the daily time frame, choppily going to the upside. Choppily, because look at all these moves back and forth. It's not having those massive moves you've seen with a lot of these other charts where it goes straight up and then consolidates. This is higher highs and higher lows in a very choppy situation. It's currently had an extended resistance area test amongst this 24 area, sort of like in here. So breaking that, maybe you have an okay gain, but of course in a choppy level right now. Furthermore, on the weekly time frame, where we are now, situation of resistance, back to where it was. So really this tells me a couple things. One, I mean, if it could very easily pull back, where was it before? Somewhere in here seems like the first most logical area. And the second thing is because this was a big area, if it is taken out and buyers come in control, this could be an interesting move that would follow. But I think that's the rare situation. But however, I mean, that would be normal if this level is not resistance. It's a pretty decent sized green candle on this chart. Next up is a Vertcoin or Vertcoin, which is a VTC. Interesting pattern on the daily time frame. First off, previous level of resistance acting as support within the 18 average. The most recent resistance in or around near the 45 handle is obviously the key number I'll be looking for to take out. I like how it's been supporting this area. That on any liftoff, this thing could have a good move. As it stands right now, it's had a break of this more short-term resistance back to where it is. So either it's a good play and it should bottom somewhere in here before going higher, or it's going to create this failed breakout and thus test these lower areas. Let's take a look at another time frame, starting within the 4 hour, which a big bold line, but nonetheless, it's a uptrend that's been coming into play. I'll make the next one not quite as like a normal size, I guess. Just a quick little line in here, ascending triangle. So there's a situation in which it has had the break above that and it's now back within the range. So therefore, it's either telling you, okay, we're ready to go. We just need a little bit of breather room here on the first push. We got to move back to this 18 average band. You see the further momentum. Yeah, the story says we're ready for a good move. But if this thing doesn't hold with this failed move, oftentimes from a failed move, you're going to get a fast move in the opposite direction. And when I look at this on the weekly time frame, I can see moves on either side. I can see a big move either way. It wouldn't surprise me if it has any type of correction back within here. But at the same point, it has just left resistance amongst this 18 band, and there's nothing to say why it can't come up and test this area or within this range as well. So it's a very difficult one to put any type of bias on either side because either way of the story makes sense, but it's definitely volatile either way, like almost every single code is. Let's move on to Bitcoin Plus code XBN. And on its daily chart, there's a sick move. An extremely sick move, 0038 to sync to 12. Or, yeah, 0030. Holy crap, that's a huge move. Okay. So after its big move, it has done nothing but go sideways within this range. And after a move of that nature, you're talking about huge volatility because where do we leave this band from? And even up to 50, you could talk as this upper range as well. But going from 55 to 120, just a previous high, that's a gain of a little over 100%. And you tell me where support is. Maybe a weekly time frame, or even, a weekly time frame will help. So let's put that up. And where it came from is 60 and 35. Extreme risk versus extreme reward. I mean, I don't know how extreme the reward would get, but it wouldn't surprise me if it pulls back to 003 when it's at single 03 now. That's about a 90% loss. Nothing too big. Yes, that's something big, and that's why how comfortable are you losing pretty much everything, because you could get scared and panicking after a big loss in here and then sell in the bottom. It's so and even not even sell on the bottom, but panic here, and then the market does this. And then, unless you bought back in here, that would be a play you're not going to be too happy with. So just be familiar with the huge risk associated with something like this. Let's look next at Counterparty on the daily time frame. Code XCP, which had this little bit of resistance in here, barely taken out, back down to the band, barely taken out, back down to the band. Is it ready to lift off again for another play? Because it's most certainly been in a very choppy uptrend. As price action approaches on the weekly time frame, this much bigger area, roughly at around 90 up to about would be 100, I would guess. As the price action is nearing this area, this would be like the comeback area on any big moves back lower, but it does seem as if there is a break above here that it could test some serious areas up here. And if you know something fundamentally that they got something going that's going to make it work, then obviously you want to get in as cheap as possible. You also might want to make sure that, well, in my book, if this thing is going to make it up to, say, between this 30 and 40 number, and then before it reaches 30 or 40, it's going to have to reach close to 16. And if I'm going to be trying to sell, say, at 32 and buy at 16, that's 100% return on my investment. So if I'm risking everything on a play of this nature, as long as I'm right half the time, it's going to be breaking even. Also, let's just assume you go in a long position here and you use the same type of sell area of 32, looking for 100% gain. If you put some sort of panic sell loss in here, well, you're talking about selling or buying at 160, selling at 45. I mean, you might as well just risk the whole thing anyway. Now you'll need to be right about 40-something% of the time to break even. But that's one thing I'd be looking more towards, is I'll move a little bit higher, because I think the risk here is that you have a pierce and then do something like this. And then it could be a long journey to get back up if something like, say, that were to happen, because that's not like it's an uncommon feat. But I would expect big moves, however, though, if this thing can get going above here. Let's look at EDIAB, or XCEB. It's called DAB. Its code is XCEB. And it's a lot like Ripple as far as it's had the big move. It's just correcting in a negative bias situation, a lot of support within this area. Now the question is, if this area fails, how big of a fall is it going to have? There's still a lot of work within this 18 average band that needs to be done. Oh, maybe it just might just zoom up higher from any point. That's the case, but it's unlikely. At least if you see before, there's a situation in here where it got above, went sideways, with a few indications or reasons to go in with better SPY indicators. I want one of those first, but this is a very scary chart with a message on the weekly that tells me that, I mean, it could technically fall to like 18 to 30, which is a move of like 60-75% down. It's came back down to this 18 average barely just for the last few periods. But you still might want to give this considerations when it starts to leave this on the weekly time frame for risk reward. Here's a spot where it goes from somewhere around 900 Satoshi with a good buy indicator in here up to 13,000 Satoshi. I mean, those are just extreme sick numbers. Is it capable of having another move? Is it fully extended and having like 40x type of gains are no longer in play? You're going to have to settle for lousy 300% gains like everything else. And lousy is pretty much normal moves. That's what a lot of codes do for a move, is they'll triple or quad in value, which is huge in itself. But anyway, let's move on. Take a look at Monero and a little bit of breaking up the smiley face bowl pattern. Within this little move, having a difficult time within the 18 average of lows. We also got the 18 average of highs, not been touched in a while, starting to decline. It's very choppy, very difficult to trade this time frame unless you know and you like trading a choppy market. But on the weekly time frame, I think it's got a beautiful pattern forming as since this break higher. Beautiful up move, moving from 0026 to single 026, so basically a 10x gain. And a beautiful price correction down, a little bit of sideways action, test of previous high, back to support, test of previous high, back to support. So with all this being said and done, I can make a pattern case that this has got this solid uptrend and this ascending triangle. Usually these things will follow within the path of least resistance. Right now, of course, within this move, that would be higher. But, I mean, huge move occurred when it got going. And that's when it left the band. Now, it's been bullish on this band for a little bit, but it's only had, so far, just a one-test move. That's it. So it's had this huge move like this before. A lot of these other codes, like 200, 300% moves, it's like it's everyday nonsense or every week stuff. It just happens all the time. It's every day, like you brush your teeth. It's just normal stuff to happen. And it looks like when this thing is ready to go, and I don't know when, it can continue going sideways like this until August for all I know. But when it does manage to break through above this point, I wouldn't be surprised to have sweet gains that take place. Let's move on to Prime Coin now, and it's got an interesting daily chart as well, with this choppy sideways action that occurred with all of these interesting resistance tests. But every single time in here, it pulled back within this trading range, within the sideways 18 average, after a nice uptrend with consistent highs, back to the band. Yes, sell orders, have them in place, but back to the band. And now it's at the point where it's leaving it again in here. This choppy move back down to here, up move, and this thing might be ready to get going for another game. There still might be a further correction down to where it came from in here, so something else to keep your eye on as well. Focusing on it long term within the weekly chart, we can see that this is just attempting to get things in order after it in 2014 into 2015 with a huge downtrend. Rally attempt to get things going, it ultimately failed with a multi-month, even few year pattern of declining the 18 average or just a basic downtrend. And then, of course, attempt number two, because this is attempt number one. Now it's attempt number two. A lot of resistance area matching within this. But what this does give you is price objective, you would think, that if it can manage to break out of an area resisting, then just maybe it might go to 001. And here's an example of price actions in here somewhere. Then you probably might want to consider making a case for the play, even in around here, because you would know that after this consolidation, it just did that successfully. It consolidated an up move and now is ready for the next play. But there's no guarantees on that. And if this thing rolls over at any time, given how bearish this has been, the support level of early 2015 obviously barely played again, that it would probably come back down to it. And the more often you test a key level, the more likely it is you take it out. So another word of saying high risk versus high reward. Moving on to Ripple XRP, which I've talked a lot about this recently. And after this huge move, this consolidation pattern with the 18 average doing nothing in a positive form, in this sideways mode, a small, barely piece of resistance established, as well as in here. I need to see more for this to go on the bullish camp, but wild moves are playable. I mean, however, if this thing breaks down, there's huge risk again with this one. However, when you look at this on the weekly time frame, it's interesting pattern when you got to move up here, back down to the band. Look what happens when it's leaving it. And now you ask yourself the question, is it leaving it? So, you know what, getting in above here, I'm probably going to be adding just small amounts, but enough for if I lose at all, I'm like, okay, I can risk that, because I realize I'm going long at around 13 something, looking to get gains well north of here. So that's pretty much my bet idea when I'm doing something like that. And then buy orders down here. I mean, I got them in there, because it wouldn't surprise me if it did go down here, and I think it's got an okay potential. It's at least realistic. Then I could probably be able to sell back in here. And if I'm just holding Bitcoin, what's the difference if it's just doing nothing somewhere else or if it's in a buy order? That's how I look at it as. Let's move on to Vcash, code XVC. Interesting pattern again. Very choppy, very choppy. However, this resistance establishment, and so many times it would come up here and come back. Sell orders, people. Sell orders. I mean, you buy, and literally, look how many times you got it. You sell order, you buy back. Sell order, buy back. Sell order twice, buy back. Sell order, buy back. Sell order, buy back. Hey, you hit your sellers here. It wasn't as easy to buy back again. But quite frankly, consistently, you could have been able to put sell orders in around 18 plus and then buy back at 14-ish or so or less. That's a pretty good profit. But now, as far as the patterns going, we can see the consistent higher lows, and now the higher lows are in the area where previous high is. So ascending triangle, this thing looks pretty interesting, and it could be ready to blast off for some good gains. As we look at this, a weekly chart, sell order. I mean, this is, if you're in this code, please have orders in for big gains. They're just out there. But as far as where you can go up to, well, into this area here, definitely little risky. This is where I think if it comes back to, that's where it was before, where there would be a level of support. And the final code, after about an hour and a half of daily analysis, said, you know what, I got to find a way to put these codes out fast. But if I go too fast, I'm going to lack information. And I'm only going to do like the extreme codes like this from A to Z every so often. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, show like 5, 6, 7 coins. Bitcoin's like not noteworthy today, which is why another reason why I'm doing this. And yeah, so be your normal, like, try to do the best I can to put the best production, best information possible, because really that's my goal. I really want to see how damn good I can do at making this. But with that being stated on Zcash, Zcash, it's said Z in Canada. That's how we learned it. And the Americans learn it as Z. And I'm not too sure about other parts of the world. This was a previous range, so if it ever falls back to where it came from, This is where we have it. I like how it's supporting this previous very fast touch resistance area for several days. It's now within this 18 average correctionary phase. Like a lot of these things, when you have a good move, nice move here, and then a nice move here, you can pretty much make the case again breaking this resistance. Let's move this over to the weekly and final chart of this video. And it really doesn't show much. It does show that it just went straight down. So at 3,200, wow, people thought it was a little expensive. Wow. Anyway, I don't know how much of that you consider for real trading. But what I like about this is I got some nice scaling, and I can just draw some quick lines like here, here, so somewhere around here. And you know what? I'm drawing somewhere near 40, and we're at 13. So that tells me right there that upside potential, yeah, 3x, that's nowhere near out of play. As a conservative figure, you got this uptrend. And you know what I like about this chart? You can't see it too well, but if it's pretty obvious to tell, after this resistance and move back really to the 18 average of highs at least, I like how for 2 periods it was consolidating it within such, and the period before was a nice green candle above resistance consolidating here. I think this thing is ready to go for some decent gains. I am long this myself, so I'm happy that I am. Thank you for tuning in, and have yourself a great day. Bye-bye.